have TJ Kemp. Uh, Coach Kemp grew up playing lacrosse at McCully School in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Following a collegiate career playing for Coach Joe Bresci at UNC, moved to Atlanta for work and to play for the Atlanta Blaze. TJ spent time coaching with McCully, Centennial, and Lassiter High School, winning 2 championships and helping to guide numerous All-State and All-American players. At the club level, TJ was part of the original LB3 lacrosse family and transitioned with them as they merged into LB3 Thunder. Having taken a break following COVID, he's now joined the staff at 3D Georgia, helping to coach their nationally ranked 2027 Red Team and guide offensive players throughout the organization. When not on the field, you could find Coach Kemp in a pair of slacks and a polo, helping businesses scale in his role as a consultant with Symposia. He's not very good at golf, but he's actively working on his game. Thanks for joining us today, Coach.
Absolutely, man.
Hey.
I really appreciate you guys.
Hey, TJ, thanks for joining us today. Hey, just tell us real quick, like, how did you get started with lacrosse?
Yeah, so my dad, Troy, was a lacrosse coach at McCallie for many, many years. I think like he might have gotten to 30 years, if not really close to it. And so we always had sticks around the house. It's really interesting. His background was in football. He actually played both at Colgate, but came in as a football guy. And it was just something for him to sort of stay engaged with all of his DBs and some of the skill guys at McCallie in the spring. It was either that or run track. They asked him if he wanted to help with the lacrosse team, so he did, and I was just kind of there being an ankle biter along the way. So Coach Mandarano actually was the Lassiter guy all while I was growing up. So I'm sure he'll remember me as a rug rat, and then actually as a player too. Got the pleasure of playing against them as well. So I've kind of been around it all the time. Was a multi-sport guy, but it's something that was very much in my blood, and I was happy to have a chance to pursue.
Yeah, that's great.
So you mentioned your dad. Yeah, I had the pleasantry of coaching against him, and a lot of the time unpleasantry of playing against his teams. But something I took away from your dad as a coach was, definitely prepared. You guys were always prepared, always ready for a lot of things. And I remember one game we were at Lassiter, and I'd kind of talked to our guys about, playing quick off the whistle. And so if the ball gets out, get it ready, let's go, we're going. And we actually got a goal off of a quick whistle. And your dad looked and kind of just started saying, he's like, oh, they got me one time. They got us one time. That's not going to happen again. And your dad was good at it. We'd have a lot of conversation, but, never was derogatory, but was just kind of talking and coaching a lot. And I always enjoyed it. Like, it wasn't fun, sometimes the scores and whatnot against you guys, but it was fun playing against them. How was it playing for your dad?
I mean, it what you said there kind of encapsulates a lot of it. It's kind of like playing for Deion Sanders or Shannon Sharp or one of those guys who always has a quip or a soundbite ready, and the consistent monologue or almost feed of commentary from the sideline it's really his way of keeping things light for us.
Yeah.
Always trying to give us the credit, and he would always kind of take a lot of the blame. And I think that style of leadership, along with the preparedness and what he would really call being great by choice, is something that persisted not only on the lacrosse field but on the football field with us, and then for most of us off the field, which is why so many guys are so loyal. And what I mean by great by choice is really that in any organization, high achievement people struggle to coexist with low achievement people, not because of any real gap in talent, but because they confuse the high achievement people. What I mean by that is, if you're somebody who's a little kid, and I just kind of had this conversation with our young Lassiter guys at the Triad Clinic the other day that were just brand new. It doesn't take any special talent to put your foot near the cone or to follow through with your back shoulder towards the target or to scoop through a ground ball with two hands instead of one. You don't have to be like a gifted athlete to do that, but those who do it all the time typically are very high achievement. Well, for those that have consistently made those decisions and have been great by choice, they're confused as to why other people don't do that too, because they know it doesn't take anything special, but it does take a special level of commitment. And so one thing that my dad always kind of taught us And we were blessed to have some great teams with actually a lot of Lassiter kids on the teams. And I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
you're acutely
yeah,
aware. My buddy Parker
yeah,
Mincy, shout out to him. We almost
yeah.
got Griff Levy.
Yeah, that was
That was
great.
good.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you keeping Griffin here, though. That was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. He's coming back to coach Lassiter this year. I've been trying to get him for years and years,
That's
which is
awesome.
cool. But yeah, it's one of those things where what I take away from having my dad as a coach is very much, keeping things light with the banter, being deferential when it comes to taking credit, being the first to stand up when it's time to take accountability, and then also making sure the kids know that it's within all of them to be great by choice. And it's something that we have to practice doing. And we literally break down the huddle by saying dominate on three, not really dominate your opponent, dominate your opportunity, right? Dominate yourself, that own, that sort of self-reflection and self-awareness that it takes to do that. So that's the biggest thing I
Well,
took away.
and you actually live by it because my son played for your junior select this past spring, and you were down there in the beginning of the season, and you were like, nope, give me that pass back. Snap your wrist. Why are we doing this? This, that, and the other. And you're definitely living by it, and you're continuing to teach what your dad preaches. So I think that's obviously a big compliment to your dad, but good for you as a son listening and embracing it as well.
I tried it. I've gotten better at it over the years. Back then, maybe not so much.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's probably one of those things where like the longer you do it, those voices just come back into your head. And you're like, oh, I know what he meant now. Like kind of one of those deals where, uh, like you said, do things with a purpose, and
Yeah.
it just comes. The more you coach, the more those things come back, and the lessons you learn from your father pay off. So how did attending Macaulay prepare you for academics and lacrosse at the D1 level?
Yeah, man, that's something that I can never be grateful enough for. And it's a big reason that I coach now. So coming up at Macaulay, I grew up on campus as a faculty kid. So I was always in every field and every library and the dining hall with not just, my friends and colleagues and great teachers, but, generation after generation of families who set their kids up uh, to have those resources at their disposal. I mean, it's no secret. It costs a ton of money to go to Macaulay. Now, tons of kids have financial aid, but it is something where, you're very rarely there on accident. You're there because of an unbelievable amount of talent that people have recognized, or an incredibly consistent plan that your family has really stayed consistent to over, decades and decades and decades. So what I didn't realize that I was absorbing even through osmosis was just like being around people that were very much prepared, being around people that planned to win, being around families that were very, very invested in their kids' success. And so to me, that was very normal. Even when I went to college, it was really surprising to me to be among some of the best players in the country, not only on my team, but maybe on some other teams. And for them to tell me, yeah, man, like my dad's never come to a game that I've played at. Or, my parents aren't going to make it to any of the tailgates, or they're not going to be around. So I was just like, realized it's the uncommon level of investment that adults put into kids at Macaulay. So
Mhm.
academics aside, athletics aside, just being invested in the people around me and recognizing that investment and just having an attitude of gratitude is something that made a big difference. I will say that in the classroom, the big thing at Macaulay is teaching kids to think critically, and then to execute once they feel prepared. Not so much to memorize or go through the motions or, you know, repeat some recipe. It's very much critical thinking, problem solving, and you're taught that you're really an opportunity generator. Like when you're faced with a series of problems or something that's complex, hey, take a deep breath, break it down into its different parts, and then let's engineer a solution. And that's something that I took with me on the field, certainly as a coach, and then by day in my job, it's something that I'm fortunate to be able to do professionally. It's basically break things down and try and find a better way and figure out who I need to collaborate with, or when I need to defer and get out of somebody's way or something. I credit a lot of that to Macaulay, and that foundation is something I try and bring with me anywhere I go.
That's great. That's a great opportunity, and you've obviously taken advantage of it and been able to be successful. So that's great to hear. Um, so kind of a two-parter. Where did you play club lacrosse? If you did, what kind of summer events did you attend to help get recruited? And then what was your recruiting experience like?
Yeah, the interesting one. truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. I think this is maybe one of those cases. I didn't have a club team. Never
Yeah.
played on one. There were some options in Georgia. There was like Copperheads and
Yeah.
Shocker. Actually, you know what? After I was committed, then people started asking me if I wanted to play on their team. So I would play
Yeah.
in one tournament with the Shockers, or like I played one tournament with Dukes back in the day, and like I would get invited to Champ Camp or whatever with some random team because they
Right.
always want to find the ringer to get out there. But
Right.
until then, every summer I pretty much spent preparing for and dreading football camp, basically. So I was
Right.
out doing 7-on-7s and lifting weights and probably skipping some reps when I should have been lifting weights and just
Yeah.
overall sweating. And I think one thing that a lack of club ball really protected for me was the integrity of the competition. So like these kids now, I think, are a little bit desensitized
Right.
to how important every game is, because
Correct.
oftentimes it may actually be a high ROI decision to let off the gas in the
Yeah.
second half of the game because you have another 3 that day.
Right.
For me, that was never the case. I was waiting until next week. And these are teams that I've been seeing my dad play against and get beat by or beat or whatever
Right.
for 15 years. So I was like,
Right.
dude, I'm never gonna. I mean, as a player, like if there was some kid who was gonna shoot when the game was out of hand and like you're supposed to be holding on the ball, I was probably the kid still going to the rack at the end of the game. And just I never really lost that. And so when I finally did go to some recruiting showcases, I was fortunate to be invited to Top 205, which was a big one at that time, and then Peak 200. I actually did not get invited to Blue Chip the first time around. So my dad was like, "Hey, son, like, we didn't have tons of resources. We had 3 kids. Like, we were very fortunate once again to grow up at Macaulay, so it felt like we had tons of resources, but we just had to be really mindful and price conscious in those things that we did." And he was very transparent. Look, man, like this is a sacrifice we're having to make to drive up here and stay up here for a few days, and we're going to bounce around from place to place over this week stretch. Man, listen, no pressure, but like understand this is the opportunity that you've really worked for. Proud of you. I need you to go and make sure everybody knows how excited you are to be here. And that's what I did. I went out there and I got after it. And the other piece of advice that was great advice that I remember Coach Petramala, the Hopkins coach, gave us that I really took to heart was, hey, whoever you think the best player is out here, make sure you play against that guy and try and beat him as much as you can. So I literally would like, whoever the guy was, I would go hunt that guy, whether it was Tom Schreiber or Mark McNeil or whoever it is. It's my age. I'm like, if I want to get paid, I got to beat this dude. And sometimes I got the worst end of that, but at least I was in the mix and I was like, I tell you what, I'm going to go try. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches really, really respected, and it opens some doors for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know in the hockey world, when kids are going through junior hockey camps, and you'll see a kid will take on the biggest guy or the best player on the ice, and coaches really do take notice, whether he gets taken to the woodshed or whatever. The coaches will notice that for sure.
Yeah.
What was your recruiting experience like? How did it go for you? I know, obviously it was kind of in a different time than it is now, and like when you can commit and all that stuff. But, besides all the showcases and the things that you did, what was your recruiting like?
Yeah, it was super different than it is now. I mean, Scott Ratliff and I used to joke about this because there was a few guys, right? But really us two, Rick Lewis, Griffin, obviously, there's Darius Bowling. There's like probably 4 or 5 dudes from this area who had considerable recruiting intention. None of us had ever gotten like ranked, obviously. There's no precedent for that.
Right.
So, coming into September 1st, that's a pipe dream. Like I was literally just happy to be at camp, and all I wanted to do was bring some honor to the Macaulay silver helmet. Like that's all I wanted to do, is people know that we have one guy who can play, really. And so coming to September 1st, my expectations were 0, basically. Woke up that day, and I mean, I'll never forget this. And we talk about it now. Now he's a coach of Carolina, but Coach Petro was at Hopkins. That was my dream, was to be like Kyle Harrison. He wrote me a note at 12:01 a.m. said, "Have a nice day." I couldn't believe it. I literally ran around my house like it was Christmas and I was a 6-year-old, like flew around. Over the course of that morning, I was fortunate to just be inundated with different letters and things like that, which was, it was numbing. Like I had no idea how to even process that. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know if I was getting prank called, like what the deal was.
Yeah.
I opened up the Ohio State letter and said, "Hey, select the game you want to go to." Just going to the game, mind you, I was really a football guy most of the, up until like kind of my junior year. So we ended up going to some of those. But as far as the process, it was humbling and bewildering all at the same time at the beginning. We ended up nailing down a few different options that we wanted to take a look at that fit the bill academically, athletically, what have you. And Ohio State, credit to Coach Nick Myers, I still have a great relationship to him or with him to this day. He's the one who really came the strongest at the beginning. I actually ended up going out to the Penn State football game, and I committed to go to Ohio State. That was my first visit I ever went on.
Okay.
And I was like, man, you're never going to beat this. And he gave me a super competitive financial package, and he was aware of our situation and what needed to happen. I also was fortunate to win some academic merit money, and it is all kind of lined up later on in the process. My number one school that I wanted to go to really was North Carolina because of just the proximity to home. And Charlotte is a big pipeline in the Raleigh-Durham area to Macaulay. So like a lot of my best friends were from North Carolina who I lived in the dorm with. That was a huge pull. Obviously, academically, it's really hard to beat that. But it was really no disrespect to Ohio State. And Coach Myers actually was he was obviously very disappointed when I decommitted and flipped over, but it happened like within the same week or so. And it was one of those things where there's an argument to be made that as far as a 4-year decision, I probably would have had more success at an Ohio State and I say it to kids all the time, like going somewhere where people have a plan for you rather than going somewhere where people, respect your talent and like you as a player. But, Coach Myers at Carolina, who's the offensive coach, told me, he said, I just couldn't afford for you to really pan out somewhere else and us have to deal with that. Honestly, every opportunity. So it's like, as far as the recruiting cycle, I think I saw all elements of it from being kind of an unranked unknown coming into the circuit to then being, I think I got ranked as high as maybe number 29 or something like that coming out of that summer, having lots of options, kind of zeroing in on a few, committing, decommitting and flipping to Carolina kind of with that academic situation and maybe the competitive upside in mind at the time during that era. And, it's something that I'm really happy that I did because of the lifelong friends I made. My experience as a player was great at school. I obviously got to live out my dream of playing the MLL, but recruiting wise, I think I've seen kind of every side of that thing. And also kind of as a player too. So that's something that I try to bring with me anytime I'm talking with families about what to do with their son or their daughter or what have you. So yeah, kind of seen it all there, man.
Yeah, it's good stuff that you talk about. I mean, it's kind of what we've been through the last year or so, trying to make decisions with the kids. So ultimately, why did you choose UNC?
Yeah, I think the big thing was, like I said, it just academically, it was something that was more familiar to me. Ohio State has an unbelievable academic support system, but it's a school of 60,000 almost. So when you go there, it's very much you're a very small fish in a very big pond academically. Right. They shrink that pond with the academic support and the facilities and the tutors and things like that. But at Carolina, smaller class sizes by a lot. It was just way more familiar to Macaulay. It felt a lot like what I was used to. Yeah. And not for nothing, I think that just, there's no shade towards any Buckeyes, but the standard of admission is just super, super high at Carolina. So it was, even just interacting, as athletic as I've ever been or anything like that, I always want to be known for how articulate I am and what kind of thinker I am and problem solver. I want that to precede me. And that's something that people assume at Carolina that they did not assume while I was at Ohio State. And it was like, I was much more interested in being a well-rounded sort of student athlete going in than I was drinking a bunch of beers and whatever. So not to say that people at Ohio State do that all the time.
I know
it was a priority. They do that all the time. They're great dudes. But, anyway, that was the sales pitch that they gave us. So my mom was in on that, and we were already wearing blue, which is a little bit different shade. So it was it's easy.
Well, I mean that's a great example that you're setting for the kids that you coach. And you can be successful as an athlete, a lot of different places, especially if you're a really, really good athlete. but in this game, there's only so far you can go.
Yeah.
And to have the ability to come out with a great education and, that being a major decision for you, I think, does a good job leading by example for everybody to say, your career is probably 4 years.
Yeah.
And after that, you got to go to the real world, and it really does make a difference. So, by you setting that example is pretty awesome. And, as a dad, that's appreciated. So thank you. Um, so tell me what was it like, or how was it playing for Coach Bresci, and who were your assistant coaches at that
Yeah.
time?
So the assistant coaches, we had an unbelievable staff. Brian Holman, who's now the head coach
Yep.
of the Cannons, the man, father figure type guy. Coach Bresci's the man, high energy. I'll touch on that in a moment.
Yeah.
Chris Fife's also the man,
Yep.
who's the head coach at Vermont. Had a
Yep.
ton of success, absolute beauty. Steve Toomey, who's now the defensive assistant at Tufts, who's won a couple championships there. Smartest guy in most rooms that he walks in. And then Pat Myers, who is the younger brother of Nick Myers
Yeah.
and a longtime assistant of Coach Bresci. So like in a different way, each of those guys have had a huge impact on who I am. And sometimes it's about what they teach you, about what you want, and sometimes but they teach you kind of what you don't want or who you
Right.
don't want to be, quite frankly. And so for me, Coach Bresci has been a guy who has been the most gracious, positive, encouraging, and supporting influence in my life. And like I messed up a lot when I went to school, being late to stuff, like no like real criminal violations or anything like that. But like something like, me showing up as a freshman, two different color socks on. To me, I'm like, all right, man, like whatever. Like I'm wearing two different color socks. Or one's an ankle sock, one's a long sock. I couldn't find it. I don't know what you want me to tell you. That is like now looking back, I'm like, dude, that's not being great by choice. Like that's
Right.
not what you're talking about. You showed up 4 minutes late. Everybody else is already stretching and you're in there. So he I had to pay the price for that for sure. But he always sort of tried to turn an L into a lesson with me. And if that meant I had to run two stadiums before practice for a week and then get back out there, it was always a, hey man, we're going to handle the disciplinary stuff. We're going to talk about it. Let's dig a little bit deeper and see what's going on. But, as a player, I respect what you can do and I respect your work ethic and I respect what kind of teammates you are on the field for sure. So it's been something where he's taught me a ton about how to handle my own immaturity. And as I've gotten older and older and older, kind of like my dad, it's like, man, I just couldn't be more appreciative for for how long of a leash he gave me while I was maturing and my brain was developing, quite frankly.
Yeah.
As far as those other guys, Coach Holman, I mean, what can I say about him that hasn't already been said? What a wonderful mentor. You can see it in his son, Marcus, who's now an all-time great player.
Yep.
Just great by choice is the best way to put it. Like Marcus Holman is an average athlete from just a talent standpoint. He'll be the first one to tell you that. I play Call of Duty with him, once a week still. Like he's one of my good boys. And he'll be the first one to tell you he's got a 19-inch vertical. But let me tell you, he comes out there and puts his foot next to that cone in every single drill. He hits the wall exactly like you're supposed to. He does the homework in the film room. He gets the extra reps and even things that he knows he's probably not going to do in a game, left hand time and room from the like things like that. He still works on it because he expects himself to live at that standard if he wants anybody else to ever follow him. Yeah. And so something I learned from Coach Holman and Marcus by extension. So I was grateful to have both those men in my life is you're only a leader if people follow you. So like, and it's also possible to lead people in the wrong direction if you're charismatic enough and you're slouching it. And I was guilty of that at sometimes, kind of being the ringleader, being the man, being the guy who knew what the move was after practice or after the game. But, I missed my tutor on Thursday. So I've led people astray and I've also seen them lead them in the right direction. And over time, I've sloped towards that line of best fit. Other two coaches, I'm trying to think. Yeah, Fives, he was a super young guy when I got there, like 24. He was a dude in our class in particular. We were Coach Bresci's first class. So many of us were due to what have traditionally fit the archetype of Hopkins or, Ohio State or UVA or something like that. But we all kind of conspired, if you will. Really, we saw R.G. Keenan, the faceoff guy, go to Carolina, who was a win condition in and of himself on the circuit. Yeah. And Nicky Galasso, who was like supposed to be the best player of all time, was unbelievable player. And we were like, okay, we're not beating those two guys, so let's all go here. And so
Yeah.
we had a lot of big athletic middies, and Coach Weiss was great for us, man. Like he was fun, but he was also high energy, super competitive, and held us accountable, made sure we were pushing each other. That's what I learned there. And then Toomey and Toomey was just about preparation. I mean, he was director of ops at the time. Obviously, that was a little bit below his pay grade. Now that we see what he's doing now, winning championships every other year, super awesome guy. And then Pat Myers, who I think has a tremendous mind for the game. I learned the most probably as a coach tactically, just thinking about the game the way he saw it. So he very much sees the game as six folks, or at least he did at the time, six people that have kind of an equal burden on what's or an equal responsibility to contribute. Now that contribution may be as more of a point guard, it may be as an off-ball guy, maybe as a slasher, or it may be as sort of a backside presence. But everybody's got a role on every play. Everybody's got an action they can do to help the team. And if you're not aware of what that action is, or you get that wrong a lot, or you hesitate, you're not somebody that's adding value. Well, from that, I learned as a coach how to manufacture matchups for our best players at Lassiter. So we've had, probably many of the most talented or the most productive guys in the state over the last, however long I've been there, 7 or 8 years, largely just due to concepts and just things I learned when I was in college about like how to just, if you have a great attackman, and they don't really want to slide off of him, you can simply invert or run a big little back behind the goal, not for that guy, but for somebody else, and then put your stud in the high crease, turn around, see which guy has a short stick on him, pick away for that guy to cut while the two-man's happening. So now they're screwed. Like if they're going to sit there and honor that original matchup, which honestly, Georgia high school, sometimes they'd rather just live with whatever's happening behind the goal. Well, you end up with huge leverage advantages. And worst case, you end up with your stud on a short stick and it's really not supposed to guard him. So little things like that and different permutations of that backside exchange or being the third man and after a two-man game and things like that, I really picked up from Coach Myers. I also picked up on, just the importance of communication skills. And I think that's something that he's developed and worked on and has gotten way better. Certainly, I'm sure as a father and things like that. But at the time, he was a young, really talented, really, really smart coach who was in a tough spot because he had this uber talented roster of players. We had the number one class, my class, I think number two, 1-1, something like that. After us, we had Marcus and those guys in front of us who were obviously unbelievable players. So for him, it's like, really, there is an opportunity to execute on any scheme that you have in your mind. What I learned is sometimes the minimum effective dose is the right answer. And so it would have been honestly probably just as easy for us to just clear a guy through and just run down the alley and shoot, like than try to do all that extra engineering that we did. We actually could just run by everybody on their whole team. So it didn't really matter. And I think that what my big takeaway there is that as I got older and he and I communicated better and I saw it more holistically by doing things like playing on the scout team. And, most of my career at Carolina was as a second line midfielder, defensive midfielder, and sort of a two-way utility type of dude, which is probably where I should have been the whole time instead of just playing on the offensive end early on. I started to realize that all I really wanted and all any of us really wanted from Coach Myers when we were younger was to know that he trusted us. Like he trusted our decision making, he trusted whatever. And I think that he did. But the way it was received by us was very much, I don't trust you. And I remember a conversation I had with him, which was really formative, where he said, TJ, you can pretty much do anything on the field. Like you can go left hand, you can go right hand, you can roll back, you can swim, you can shoot from the outside, you can get inside, you can pass the ball. But the problem is we don't know which one of those things you're going to do. So as soon as you catch the ball, everybody's paralyzed. Like as soon as you're the Dodger, we can't mirror the dodge because you're probably guaranteed to roll back or do something else. Yeah. And so it's like you're making it harder for your teammates to play off ball. And everything we work for is for guys to be fast and make first read decisions. And every time you get it, your dynamism is almost confounding the fluidity of what we're doing. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I'd never even considered that that's the case. I was just trying to pull this guy's pants down. I had no idea. Right. And so it took us 4 years to get to the point where we could have that conversation. And obviously me being late to stuff or, missing the cage didn't help any of that. But it's something that I'm grateful for having learned from him because now as a coach, I'm known as the sensei who teaches everybody how to shake and shoot and do all the fun stuff. that's, in the individual sessions and stuff on the weekend and when they're trying to grow their skill set. As a coach for Lassiter High School and for my club team, what I try to teach them how to do is harness that and use the minimum effective dose of dynamic play to create separation and be a points guy, but also to set your friends up and make their job really, really easy. Yeah. And it's something that I don't think I would have ever learned had I not had that experience with Coach Myers. And, he's had a lot of success at Lafayette leading that program and at Penn. So certainly credit to him, but it's something where he was growing while we were all growing. And I really think that if he would have been a little older or we would have been a little bit more mature, boy, we would have probably had a really good chance to make some great runs instead of losing to Denver 3 times.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you mentioned earlier that you played in the MLL. What was that like?
Oh man, that was awesome. I would more so say I was part of a lot of MLL teams than I played at some. I played in 12 games probably.
Okay.
In a long time.
Hey.
It was something where I was always a guy who was there. I was always kind of next man up. And it was just awesome, having come out of Carolina and frankly, certainly while I love all my friends, I love my experience. And as I said, I wouldn't trade that for anything in those lessons. As far as a lacrosse player, I just had a lot more in the tank. Like I had a ton more in the tank where I couldn't remember the last time that I went out and I played, to what I felt was my full potential, where I was attacking another team's best guy, running by him and creating opportunities for my teammates. So I remember very clearly after that first year, I had an opportunity to go up to the Bayhawks training camp. And, I'll never forget that Spencer Ford was the GM at the time, who I'm sure now is in the PLL or doing something. He's a brilliant coach and one of the great roster guys of all time, just finding kind of hidden gems. He kind of recognized my ability and was like, hey man, these next few reps, I'm going to put you up against Kyle Sweeney and CJ Costabile and some of these guys are all-time players. And I need you to run by them. If you don't run by them and score, then it's just the end of the road. And I did. I was able to run by. I don't know if they stepped on a rock or what happened, but I'll take it. And I was able to have some success there. And, I went from being pretty much a guy who was a career great athlete at Carolina and had an ACC pedigree and certainly made some impactful plays in big games and ACC tournaments, things like that. But I was never an All-American or never considered for any of that. I went from that to being a guy who was basically one of the first guys out on their roster and just on the cusp. He made some calls for me and I had a chance to go down to training camp with the Florida Launch. Coach Stan Ross gave me an opportunity down there, which I'm forever grateful for. And I played, most of that season, had a pretty tough ankle injury, and then some really talented guys, Connor Busick and Lyle Thompson and dudes like that came in right after. So it put a squeeze, and I was very much a practice roster guy after that for a while. Coach Ross gave me a chance, and then in Atlanta when they had a team there, they acquired me pretty early on, and being a local guy, you have an advantage because basically that's one less plane ticket they have to buy. Yeah. So that opened some doors for me, and was just always, always, always grateful. After I scored my first goal pretty early on, I just that was it. That's all I had to do, right? I grew up at McCullough lacrosse camp, and I got out there, and man, I'm playing with Casey Powell. Holy crap! This guy's on my wall. This is unbelievable. And from there, I just took it very, very personally to make sure that I was just grateful every time I was at practice and every time I got a chance to play in a game. I made sure I was ready. I knew the scout, ready to contribute. Great locker room guy. I tried to be at least. I think a lot of my teammates would tell you that. Great post game guy.
So you had control of the aux cord, huh?
Oh, I was a big aux cord. Oh yeah, okay. I was a big aux cord guy. All those sort of things. But being in MLL, just seeing those great players up close, on our team and on other teams. Yeah. And I won't even attempt to mention all the names of the great players that I've had the privilege to share the field with, but just seeing that up close puts it in perspective for a kid who's essentially from Chattanooga and now spends much of his time teaching kids from Marietta or Buckhead or whatever. Fellas, it's a wide world out there. Why not you? I've seen what these guys do every day. It's good. You can get there if you'll just work and work. So hopefully we'll start to see that soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, no matter how many games you played or how many points you scored, you made it to the professional level, and that's quite an accomplishment. So you should be proud of yourself for that, for sure.
So besides your dad and your college coaches, who Who's been a big mentor or influence in your life?
Man, that's another one of those where it's like, gosh, I've been blessed truly to have so many great mentors. And,
Mm.
that's probably why I still coach as much as I do. And frankly, as all coaches do, I definitely overextend to make the time to be out there with the kids as much as I am, because I just know like how much one mentor can make a difference. I'll give you
Yeah.
three. There was a guy named Sean Robinall who was my neighbor. We call him Roby, at Macaulay. And he's an upstate guy. Went to like Corning East High School, played at Salisbury. I'm not sure if he ever played in the NLL. He was very much adjacent to that. Maybe played in Ontario or something, but
Mm.
he was like the stick skill guy at Macaulay. Like he strung all the sticks. And I mean, if I paid a quarter for every hour I spent with him, I'd be in debt for the rest of my life. I mean,
Yeah.
I just hung out on that dude's porch, watching him string sticks. And there were tennis courts down behind our faculty houses at Macaulay, and we would just go down there and play catch or shoot tennis balls against the wall, or try and hit that pipe over there with a tennis
Yeah.
ball. And now you got to do it behind the back, or now you got to throw it between your legs. And so much of my stick skill really came from just absorbing things from Roby, really just figuring it out. And he now is the head or the director of the program at Boyd Buchanan
Mm.
School, I believe, in Chattanooga. Roby, forgive me if I'm off on that, but he, yeah, I couldn't be more grateful for him. So just the love of the game and how to string sticks and just skill, I think, just an appetite for developing skill I got from him. There's another guy named Jason Brooks who was probably one of my dad's best friends ever. Coached at Macaulay a really long time. We were actually both in his wedding, so we became pretty close. He came to Macaulay maybe age 21 when I was, I bet, 11 or 12. So as he grew up, I kind of grew up, and he's another guy who just on the football and the lacrosse field just created a need or a comfort in like super intense, contentious environments for me. And so like as mild mannered as I kind of am as a person day to day and as lighthearted, I developed into a pretty ferocious competitor, largely due to what he channeled in us, and he taught us that it was appropriate and necessary as a man to express that side of yourself. Like it's all right in a competitive situation to do your absolute best, and it's not a bad thing if that turns into something physical. If somebody's in your way, don't be a jerk. Have good sportsmanship, but if you need to run through something to get to an obstacle, it won't be the last time. Most great rewards on the other side of an obstacle. So you need to learn that. So I pretty much learned that from Brooks. And then I would say after college, I mean, been a ton. So I would tell you that Adam Bruckman, who preceded me at Lassiter, as a director of the program, I think a couple maybe coaches after you, coach. I
Yeah.
think he had me from about 2015 or 16
Mm-hmm.
through 2019. We kind of did the handoff then. He's the one that brought me back into the Lassiter family. And obviously, I was really familiar with Lassiter growing up. Pretty much every kid in the program came to my dad's camp in the summer, and
Yeah.
we developed great bonds and had fun. And that was a great time to be a part of Georgia lacrosse for sure. But Coach Bruckman brought me in and just see he's been a tremendous leader in the community. He's the CEO, president, proprietor of One Digital. So anytime you get off 285 and you see that giant One Digital building, that's his building. So he
Gotcha.
obviously has led some pretty strong teams over the year. I'm sure they've done $1 billion in premium in the last year, but just showing me that, because at Macaulay, the one thing that we did a good job of was blending together day students and boarding students, but we had to almost have a culture as a school that superseded anything that we had athletically, that we counted on to develop bonds. And quite frankly, that's not something that you can, a private school can never do what a public school can do as far as all the kids living in, within a couple square miles of each
Right.
other, growing up, playing together. Those bonds are impossible to teach. So that's something that wasn't native to me, that I came to really appreciate and know and love the power of. And that's quite frankly why I'm still a Lassiter now, among maybe some calls to join some of these private schools and what have you, is that I just value the community aspect of it and the difference you can make over time when you know that these generations of players are going to come back to that area and give back and have neighbors that they give a stick to. And I'm sure your daughters have done a great job of that, handing a stick to their neighbors
Yeah.
and what have you. And a lot of times those girls end up being the next stud. So
Yeah.
those would be the three
Absolutely.
mentors for me, those three men.
That's great.
So you mentioned a little bit about coming to Lassiter, but what brought you to Atlanta, first of all, and then how did you get to Lassiter?
Yeah. So coming to Atlanta, I worked for a gentleman. This would be another great mentor early on, Michael Upchurch. So his son Mick went to Macaulay after me, graduated, I believe, either 2016 or 2018, maybe 2016. Played ball at Princeton, Jacksonville family. He ran a company at the time that was called Delta Settlements. It was like a financial services group. So he hired me to come into Atlanta and sort of be an outside sales guy and really just learn the game there. They did a lot of third party negotiation, settlement management, like brokered structured settlements to people that had big lawsuits. Anyway, a bunch of boring stuff. He basically gave me my first job, my first big boy job. And that got me here. And I had been in Atlanta in the summer times coaching for LB3. So Liam Banks was a good friend of my dad over the years
Mhm.
and would bring college guys in. And we would live in people's like guest houses. Jeff Wilkes, wow, should have mentioned him. That's probably, let's put him in the number one spot, mentor wise. Geez, my bad, Jeff. He'll probably will end up watching this. He's the man. Lives in Johns Creek, been tremendously successful, and he's been like a second dad to me, truly. I lived with him for, so you know, I'm getting old, forgetting all these people. I lived with him every summer while I was in college, and we would coach those early LB3 teams out at Mill Springs Academy or any other dirt patch we
Yeah.
could find to go teach kids how to shoot. And um, when I realized I had the opportunity to both work in Atlanta and play for the Blaze team, um, and then also be near Jeff and those folks and some friends I'd made along the way, it was a no-brainer. So that's how I got to Atlanta. As far as coming into Lassiter, you know, shortly thereafter, Adam Bruckman reached out to me. He pretty much headhunted me and was like, "Hey, dude, like, we're looking for a community coach. You know, you maybe come out there a few days a week, teach some kids how to shoot." And I was like, "Okay, I'm already pretty much doing that." He said, "Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just in Marietta." I'm like, "Okay, well, I live in Buckhead. That's exit 255. So I'm thinking, you know, Chattanooga, an exit's a mile." So I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, like
Right.
255, 263, that's Marietta, huh? Sure, I'm all set. Yeah. 15 minutes. No, I drive 50 minutes both ways. Still
Yeah.
do every day. And it's funny because until like recently, I had this old beat up white Toyota Land Cruiser, man, like 2003 Land Cruiser that I was still riding around and getting probably 5 miles a gallon. And basically just, I don't know, I thought it would be a 1 year type of deal. Well, we ended up winning the championship my first year, 2017. I was like, oh, that was easy. Okay, let's
Yeah.
go. The next year I come back and I had to take a little bit of a bigger role with Bruckman having more work responsibilities. We lose in the championship game to a great Lambert team. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to leave now because we just lost and we're getting a bunch of dudes back. Come back 2019, sure enough, same thing. Lose to Lambert right there near the end. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going out like a sucker. I'll tell you guys that. And I took around with the kids that like, I was like, dude, we are now in a culture war, fellas, against Lambert Longhorns. Like we
Yeah.
are getting stuck in. I am sticking around until we win a championship off them. I was messing around, but as it turns out, not really. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I stuck around and Adam had he deserved and he had would if I would step up to the plate and kind of move into a director role and sort of, you know, also take on the challenge of kind of helping rebuild the youth program and rebuilding like the DOT summer program, helping out with the girls, all the rest of it. And I was like, you know what, man, like it's a good time in my career. I have the bandwidth to do it. I'm already used to the drive. I'm already up here anyway, and all it's going to do is feed into our success in the spring. So sure. Well, you know, I didn't realize quite what I was signing up for at the time, but I ended up being up there and still am pretty much 6 or even 7 days a week a lot of the time and helping out wherever I can. And there's some 7-year-old out there on the wall, or, you know, it might be a team of high school kids or whatever. I'm always there. So I'm very grateful to Adam for bringing me in and Jeff Wilkes for housing me and teaching me all those things in my early 20s and just all the folks along the way who have made this a really special journey.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you like to teach kids how to shoot. I've got a good story about you. Um, so I think my youngest daughter Lily was having practice down at the lower fields, and you were doing a clinic or a practice or something on the right side of the field,
Yeah.
and I was just kind of standing there against that little brick pillar where the hill meets the sidewalk, and
Yeah.
I was watching what you were doing over there, and you were firing the ball, and my first thought was, holy crap, how hard does this guy shoot? And then my second thought was, holy crap, he's going to kill a goalie. Right. So you rang one off the crossbar and it's coming my direction, and you and some of the boys are yelling heads up, and I'm looking and I'm watching it and I'm watching it, and it was still about 20 feet over my head by the time it crossed me and went down into the woods. So how hard do you shoot?
Oh, well, I don't know about now. How hard can I shoot now without injuring myself? Probably 80.
Well,
At one point, that was kind of my thing, was shooting the ball really hard. It's funny, like, we talked about my dad's camp, and one of the highlights of the camp was radar gun. And nobody had a radar gun. So, like, for us to get out there once a year, just one time a year, clock your shot. It was a fastest shot contest, and among a bunch of other contests. Like, whenever you won, you would get more tickets into this big raffle where you get a pair of like Hopkins shorts, or there'd be like a camp store and you could pick an item out of the store. Right. Everybody would pick like a head or a pair, whatever.
Right.
So, I'm all year, like, I'm friends with all these kids from Lassiter or Nashville or Charlotte or whatever. And there was no Instagram at the time. So, like, you're not like keeping in contact with any of these kids. You don't have a cell phone. So you're like, dude, next time I see you is going to be a year from now. And I'm going to shoot however many miles an hour faster. So I always could shoot hard. Long story short, I broke 100 when I was in 10th grade. So I shot like 102 maybe in 10th grade at this like Milton Legacy Cup event. And then, I floated in that range. I never broke like 110 or anything. I was like mid hundreds probably, but I did get there with both hands. So that was a big,
nice.
A big thing. So that was always where I was at. These days, I back off of that. If I see a radar gun, I'm usually the guy holding the gun now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. I just, that was a few years ago, and I was like, man, these goalies are crazy standing there.
I don't know what they're thinking. I'm like, I can't even imagine. I mean, parents, the funny thing is some of these same kids will be huge kids and they don't play football because their parents are like, I don't want you to get concussions. I'm like, dude,
right.
You're sitting in a lacrosse net.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. The worst thing you could have is a kid like me who's overgrown in 10th grade and can't aim. So I'm like, I'm more likely to hit you than anything. And I'm shooting the ball 100 miles an hour. Like when you get in college and PLL, like, they're shooting like stupid high numbers now, but they're never going to hit you for the most part. They're going to hit the corner. Right. So no, that's a funny story, man. I think
I can relate going onto the rink. I always had a hard shot, and the running joke was I'd hit the big net up in the air, not the little net where the goalie was standing. So
yeah,
I can relate.
That adds up. That adds up, man.